Is Donald Trump going to reveal himself as the Antichrist? Will this be the great reveal? Is he going to, like pull open his shirt and show us, the mark of the beast? Or I guess that's on his forehead, right? Will he be wearing his bright red MAGA cap? This was actually, a few months ago. Somebody called in, and in fact, this happens, frankly, every 5 or 6 months. Somebody will call in and go, is Donald Trump the Antichrist? And it's a pretty straightforward question, and there's a pretty straightforward answer, which is, yeah, I think so. But anyhow, this is a real thing. I don't know if the Antichrist is a real thing or not. I'm inclined to think that there is evil in the world and that there are, beings and spirits that represent it or exemplify it. But that's just my own personal belief. But I'm. The Bible is very clear. Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, said, look out. People will come in my name, and they are inwardly ravening wolves. Beware. And so, we need to ask this question, I think, on two levels. One, literally, is Trump literally the Antichrist? And the other, political and metaphorical. Is Trump an Antichrist? In other words, is he actually an evil human being who, is committed to doing evil things in the world? So, Jesus said, by his fruits you will know him, right? Or by their fruits you will know them, was how because he said there would be plural Antichrists. And, grifting, warning about grifters and con artists. Well, more than 20 women have accused Trump of rape and sexual assault. Hundreds of contractors, customers, and employees have accused him of stealing from them. These are, 10 Commandments violations, right? Throughout his presidency, he lied over 30,000 times and continues to lie daily. He pits Americans against each other by race, religion, and region in an effort to tear the country apart and thus weaken opposition to his authoritarian rule. He openly encouraged violence against unarmed people at multiple rallies, including encouraged state violence at a speech to chiefs of police, and most recently encouraged an assault on members of the press. He tried to overthrow and end our democracy. He embraced depraved, ungodly murderers, kleptocrats, and strongman rulers while ridiculing Western democracies and their elected leaders. He tried to damage or dismantle political and military systems designed to keep peace in the world, including the UN, NATO, and the Iran, the Iran deal, the JCPOA. He reaches out to Jesus' followers and then directs them toward bigotry, violence, and hatred. As an object of admiration and a role model, he's replaced Jesus in many white evangelical congregations. He delighted in tearing children from their parents and putting them in cages. He tried to end Americans' access to life-saving medical care by killing Obamacare and privatizing Medicare. He watched on TV like a delighted child as his followers killed 3 police officers, sent 140 others to the hospital, and tried to murder the vice president and Speaker of the House. He lied about COVID after disclosing the truth to Bob Woodward, causing more disease and deaths in America than in any other nation in the world except Peru. Now, the main reason Christians freak out about an Antichrist is because if you follow the Antichrist, that automatically gets you banned from heaven and cast into hell. So what did Jesus say about this? Let's get biblical. Whether you believe, whether you're Christian or not, whether you believe in all this stuff or not, this is something that the vast majority of Americans actually do believe in, and therefore worthy of discussion. Back in 1998, Louise and I had a private audience with Pope John Paul II. His private secretary, I'm forgetting his name now, I knew it for years. Anyhow, his private secretary read a book that I wrote about a guy that he actually knew, which is Gottfried Mueller. He's kind of my spiritual mentor. He's the reason that Louise and I started Communities for Abused Kids. It's why we did international relief work. It's why we moved to Germany for a year. We lived at the same place he was, at the program he was running. And the book is called The Prophet's Way, and it's actually the name of a path through a forest in Germany where Mr. Mueller used to go to pray. So anyhow, this secretary, personal secretary, Pope John Paul II, read the book, and I just, one day, Louise and I were living in Vermont, and one day we got this, 5-page fax on my fax machine, completely unsolicited, just out of nowhere, saying, you are invited to a private audience with His Holiness Pope John Paul II. It'll be at Castle Gandolfo in 19, quack, quack, quack. And then there were like pages of instructions about how Louise had to cover her body. It was fascinating. So anyhow, we hopped on a plane and went over to Rome, and the secretary met us at the Vatican and gave us a tour of a lot of the private places that the public can't get to, and the Sistine Chapel and all that kind of stuff. And then the next day, he drove us, or his assistant actually, drove us up to Castle Gandolfo, which is up on the rim of an extinct volcano on this giant lake, Lake Albano. And there was a concert, and Louise and I sat with the president of the German Bundestag and about 25, 30 other dignitaries. And afterwards, Louise and I had a private audience with Pope John Paul II. And, I asked him a couple of questions, and one answer that he gave me in particular, and I don't want to go through the whole thing, it was private, but he invoked Matthew 25, what we must do to fulfill Jesus's commission, his command. And it was pretty straightforward. I mean, it's in, as I said, you can read it in Matthew 25. I think it starts with verse 32. I could be wrong. It might be 34 or something like that. But it's known as the parable of the sheep and the goats, if you want to look it up very easily. Or there's a link to it in my article today. And it's this little moment where Jesus's disciples, his 13 disciples, finally got him all alone and said, okay, now that it's just you and me, or you and us, tell us, how do we get to heaven? Because this was the time when the Romans were actually starting to kill Christians. I mean, they were starting to come after them. And he said that, in the last days I'll be sitting on my throne, and I will be separating the sheep from the goats. And the sheep will go with me to heaven, and the goats will go to hell. And he said, here's how you know if you're a sheep or a goat. And he said, for I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. And this completely freaked out the disciples, because they said, and I'm quoting here, King James Version of the Bible, when saw we thee hungered and fed thee, or thirsty and gave thee drink, or saw thee a stranger and took thee in, or naked and clothed thee, or when saw we thee sick or in prison and came unto thee? In other words, they had never seen him hungry, naked, homeless, sick. It had never happened. So how do we get into heaven if we never did the things that you say we have to do to get into heaven? And of course, as anybody who went to Sunday school knows, Jesus' response was, he said, verily I say unto you, inasmuch as you have done unto the least of these my brethren, you have done it unto me. In other words, care for the poor, feed the hungry, care for refugees, house and clothe the homeless, heal the sick, have compassion for those in prison. Well, just by coincidence, that is a list that is literally the complete opposite of Donald Trump and the Republican Party's policy positions. It's literally the opposite. They don't want to feed the hungry. In fact, you've got almost a dozen Republican states that are turning down federal money to feed hungry school children. One in 5 children, 1 in 7 children in America goes to bed hungry at least once every year. And they turn down this money. Care for refugees? We know how the Republicans think of that. House and clothe the homeless, heal the sick. Oh no, we can't have national health care. Have compassion for those in prison. So, bottom line here, is Donald Trump the Antichrist? Well, some of the callers into my program, and I welcome your thoughts on this, pointed out that MAGA is an old Latin word for magician, a thaumaturge. His grandfather's name, when he came to America to start a whorehouse in the Pacific Northwest, was Drumpf, which has 6 letters. John, his middle name is Johann in German, so his actual name is Donald Johann Drumpf, which is 666. Weirdly, that was the same of Ronald Wilson Reagan. He armed the Saudis for their merciless bombing campaign against Yemen. Had 5 million people facing famine. His family owns 666 Fifth Avenue. He fooled millions of evangelical followers of Jesus, just like the beast is supposed to do. He put his mark on their foreheads, right? His followers with the MAGA hat. And he consorts with whores and criminals. So there you go. What do you think?